have to call for a hiatus in schmoozing now as we transition together to the poetry reading proper. I'll be introducing Rachel Blau Duplessis. My name is Joe Donahue. I'm a professor of the practice in the English department. I will be introducing her, but I'll be getting some help, which I'll tell you in just a second. Welcome to the 2025 Blackburn Poetry Reading, sponsored by the Duke English Department and brought to be by the concerted efforts of Lisa Olson, Keka Klingerman, and Quanta Holden. A mighty thanks to all three of you. Tonight, we are celebrating a major moment in the history of postmodern American poetry, the publication of the complete long poem Drafts. In case you think I'm lying, here it is. Celebrating, that is, the music that arises from a lifetime of a fierce and unwavering devotion to the art of poetry, from the pages of the poem and from the real-time voice of our reader tonight, Rachel Blau Duplessis. Drafts, begun in 1986 and concluded in 2012, sings in ways both intimate and public. This long song, this life poem, has been heard by the readers time and time again from the depths of its successive decades of its composition, heard to clarify, criticize, and praise the world. Drafts, in its near 1,000 pages, makes present an active mind at once political, philosophical, mythic, theological, and profoundly, yes, personal. Drafts indicates as well the proximity of other worlds and the still sustaining gifts of antiquity. As if guided by the ghost of Paul Celan, Duplessis in Drafts makes new one of the oldest splendors of epic poetry. She reveals to us the powerful presence of the dead, and even in passing, introduces us to the God of all that can be said to be Deixis. As another poet of the long song, William Blake reminds us, the imagination is human existence itself. And a transfiguring imagination is what Duplessis brings in her generosity into our world, draft by draft. Tonight, it's time to honor this extraordinary blue and orange achievement with a collage by the poet on the front, just so you know, like William Blake, maybe? Leave that open. Tonight, we have time to honor this extraordinary blue and orange achievement. There is nothing quite like drafts in American letters. No one person can do right by them in an introduction, but two people can. And so, Amber Manning, also known as Dr. Amber Manning, recently defended a marvelous dissertation that draws deeply on Rachel Blau Duplessis' poetry and her criticism. Amber has in fact recently published an essay in a volume of critical essays dedicated to Rachel's poetry, and she's generously agreed to add her voice to the celebration. Amber Manning?
I'm a little nervous. All right. Last week, the walls of my classroom at Sherwood Giffens Middle School, where I teach language arts to 8th graders, echoed with the words, well, really the voice, of Rachel Blau Duplessis. Together and aloud, we read from Draft 82, Hinge. The book is a mine of intersections, margins. Its inner edges pun on hinge. The book subsists by spurt and overlap, link and lap, subject and answer, declaration and perversity. Hinges are cunning, pegs allowing circulation through notches. A book hinges. It holds the door in place so they may open. Like the page, a cool mist slides down the mountain. To hear 13-year-olds read these words, to watch them invoke the voice of Rachel Blau Duplessis, was a strange, sublime, and surprisingly cosmological experience. It felt like we were summoning other worlds and other lives in a language that was both enmeshed in and fully outside of time. We were inside the hinge. After all, the hinge is the opening that can be closed, the closing waiting to be open, the edge of the book and its spine, the corners of the box set waiting to be cracked, the increasingly arthritic elbow joint, the pregnant potential of the poem, the segments of the long unfolding. Or most appropriately for this evening, the intersections of drafts. I first encountered the work of Rachel Blau Duplessis in Nathaniel Mackey's seminar on open field poetics. I was working on a paper about representations of the maternal in Olson's The Maximus poems, naturally, and Professor Mackey pointed me to purple passages. A year later, in another Mackey poetry seminar, this time on HD, I read Duplessis' magnificent Excerpts from Language Acquisition, and my understanding of what literary analysis could be transfigured. This was the kind of writing about poetry that I wanted to do, and it was the only kind of poetic scholarship that made any sense to me during the darkest moments of the pandemic. It was a palimpsest slicing through time and space and pagination, one that held me, the reader, in its conversation because, as Duplessis reminds us in that essay, what writes listens. About a month later, when it became clear that the long song was definitely singing to me, Joseph Donahue said, "I think it's time for you to read drafts." I did. Reading drafts, and I read all of them as they became available to me, was to be, in Duplessis' words, engulfed each night with a tsunami from the vibrant void of sky and space, from the implacable emptiness or unfillable fadedness of all spires, cycles, works, words, worlds, and wires. Thus, to be so in is. I learned from Duplessis that to be so in is means to hear language chewed, savored, and swallowed, and to feel for the pulse of an ending that might never come. It meant to wander through the punctum and to hunt down old copies of the New York Times science section and to research a particular eclipse over Lake Como. It meant to turn and return to other deities like Robin Glaser, Robert Duncan, Mina Loy, just to name a few. And it meant to feel language as it hungered, hinged, and bore witness. The reading of drafts was an act of the mind, spirit, soul, and always insistently the body. The encounters were, in the words of HD, no poetic fantasy, but a biological reality. For me, and I think for many others, drafts are a living hinge where language, body, history, the male mathematics, the pitching forward come together in the ever-evolving, ever-maddening, ever-magnificent surge. And so to hold the complete drafts is at once a marvel of material possibility and metaphysical impossibility. 2 volumes that call us to continually remain, as Duplessis writes in draft 114, in a state of going backwards through the work's own vibrato. Himself an accomplished wielder of the long song, Ron Silliman noted a few years ago, Duplessis' drafts begins with more questions than answers. Literally in draft 1, chasing a bird in the bush, sensing that the right answers need to be further questions. And these questions beg us to keep answering. As Duncan says, the sea comes in on rolling surfs of insistent meaning, pounds the sands relentlessly, demanding a hearing. I overhear tides of myself all night in it. Last week, one of my 8th graders said of Duplessis, "This poet is really asking us to do a lot of work." He's delightful, honestly. And he meant that, I think, as a compliment. The work of reading drafts, at least for me, led to my very first published article and to the best chapter of my dissertation. These poems continue to call and alter me from the page, from my own writing, and from the classroom. Because the work Duplessis' writing implores us to engage in, facilitates moments of wonder and acts of change. It is the kind of work we all need in today's moment in time. And if we let them, these poems offer a kind of hope, a way to, as Duplessis puts it, vector the crossroads once again, volta, volta. Friends, poets, dreamers, initiates, please join me in welcoming Rachel Blau Duplessis.
That was a little daunting to come into after, but I thank both of the introducers very, very much, and I thank Duke University, Joe Donahue, Nate Mackey, for the attention they've given to my work, and the students who seem to like it, even in 8th grade, which is astonishing, but there it is. And I'm very sort of humbled and proud at the same moment. What I thought I would do today is give a bit of a sampler. There are some things that are long. I'm not going to read the ones that are so long that you will we have to be locked in the room to enjoy them. But I will read some of the poems and then some sections of serial poems, which I'll try to tell you what they are approximately, but mostly it's a poetry reading, it's not a big explanation. So you're welcome to actually ask questions of the people who know my work best, which seems to be Joe and Amber at this point, or me, and I'm happy to try to respond after the reading if that's your mode. I don't know. Some people takes them a minute or two to process. Okay. The first poem I would like to read is, it's kind of, I chose it because it's like where we are. It's called Draft 64 // and / sort of means me in a way, like if you draw a / on the typewriter or the computer. The poem is the fosse in which to cower, hunching down by warehouses of power, a sludge-filled ditch where futurists once lay, now backwashed debris, now box store splay. Turbines process hot things and then distribute them, but nothing is what you want. Things no one sees on always-on TVs, not fake, but not as it happens unprofitable. Lemmings running on the take. So my throat opened like a snake's throat when it faces down in its natural food hiding in twigs, and my eyes opened wider, swept by headlights, fast drivers in fat cars. But I could not strike nor take in all that I saw. I had poisoned nothing, hurt nothing by myself, if ever there were such a thing that had a choice, apart from strings of stringent, stinging links that I could barely bring myself to know, standing uneven, aslant in the street, like the corner mutterer covered with a quilt, bloated with poisonous fill, although my electric other selves did damage where they found they could, all in my Sealy name. Sealy means innocent. / it was too much to be therefore so close to overcome. I could not do one step at a time, but had to step, or at least I had to step on many paths at once with too few feet to go around. Content, transfer, encoding, quoted Principal blank Rachel. I just wanted to let you know right here by writing this that I too am a stranger in these tangled corridors of strangeness, threaded through the buried graffiti and strata. Prussian blue over burnt umber, a glyph of the 20th century. So far, this one too. I limped the maze where other shivering walkers went. The hurt, the halt, the broken, I imp there. I'm a particular shadow or third beside them, in a classical cadence foregrounded by the habit of hearkening back to what we know, some idea that's so consoling. But I am leaning, I am propped, I am fractured. This is not walking, but a shuffled drag. I am trying to walk in the world as it is, but all the weights and balances are off sides and listed. The whole range of scales tilts, visionary ankle twisted trail where I am in this real world, pulling a concrete plug or slug myself. Whatever it was snapped when I put one heavy-hearted foot down on the concrete, one rancid day of mist or mist. I surely need to learn to walk again mindfully where it is necessary to go. There was ripped cloth and a hollow ring of bone dissolved into a raining snow of my own body falling slowly, swirl and clumps, and I didn't want to know there was nothing I got that I had wanted yet. A little fuzz or droplet indicates its place. There was no solution to continuing to want except continuing. Wind, rain of a shallow day, hot fix, but the firewall is, as stated, temporary. So far, there is no fix lasting longer. There's nothing more to say. And so I haunt the spot I once was riding under the road, under the mall, under the state, under everything, strata engorged and fattening shelves. Ghost. Yes, ghost. This one not complex. Just the shadow aisle of sunken hope and text. Okay. This next poem, which is different, I mean, one of the things about drafts is if you don't like it, just wait a minute, we'll change. This poem is called Being Astonished, and it's a serial poem, meaning little sections that argue different things, but all pointed to one thing. And it quotes from, the title is Lynn Hedgenin's, We Love Be Astonished, and there was an anthology with that, and this was written as a postface to that anthology. So this is about women and women writers, and basically, I guess, feminist experimental writers, some of whom would argue with the word feminist, and some would argue with experimental, and some not even argue with the word writer. But there it is, okay. So let's see. I'm starting towards the beginning, but not at the beginning. And I'll read the section numbers in case anybody's following the script here. 4. Belated, benighted, acquiesce, poetess. You have little leverage despite some qualified success. Tess, in your tress, confess. You are depressed. You are grotesque. Just look at the rhyme scheme of this poet. What a mess. You women are. You are so conscious of your address, so cultured, so cultureless, so artful, so artless. Your dear natural song, like a nightingale, like a lark, like a cuckoo, has the briefest access, attributable to flesh, more or less. Cheap-looking dress. You are upset, under stress. I can't follow the way you digress. You bring me overflowing handfuls of bountiful distress. Cress. Of course, cress is an illusion. Right? So this is one of these things where the poet is peering over the very accurate markers that I have once put in here. Let me see. Okay. Yeah, this has what do you call it? This has things on the side. I made. You can be there, okay. And I'm going to read you the thing on this side first, just to let you know what it is. traces on the Wunderblatt of all the poems ever read, look for the women. And the section goes like this. Speaking midrash in a midrash, her revulsion to the book, the obverse of her attachment to the book in the textual traditions on which she draws, and revulsion to poetry. Want to speak of that? Will no one tell me what she sings? Which is, of course, quotation from Wordsworth, a very important thing to me. Cut off sonnet. This is section 9. Shouldn't she shave? Shouldn't she just shave her mustache? I mean, in this culture. Maybe not in some other. It looks so disgusting. That was such a big spider, its forefoot and its ragged claw I killed on my light yellow wall with my dark yellow differences. A magazine, important, at one point. Trouble in the archive, through it, or did the phallus issue do it? Beauty supplies, hardware, human hair, discount. Fundamental observations, anatomical detail, error in diagnosis, other. Poetry is the space of the fold. He, she can fold over his, hers, transgender and inside it. Now there's a banquet. Too bad poetry has barely done this yet, since nothing but almost the whole poetic tradition stops it. Oh, danger to poetry as it should exist of the poetess turned feminist. This one's for Joe, for a number of reasons. 12. She hectors me in the car. She Andromaches me in the car. She Penelopes me in the car. She Nestors me in the car. I drive. She said what she said, head on, looking for the road loop. We go back a long ways. I owed her in the car. I goad her in the car. I liar her in the car. I tire her in the car. Drive, she said. Drive, I replied. This car needs gas. This car is low. Back a long ways is where we go. Oh yeah, this is, there are encoded people in here. I'm not going to tell you who they are. And this one is probably the one that I remember the best. I'm going to read you the sidebars first. One sidebar, sort of per stanza. It's in quatrains, and the sidebar is to assert a gendered self and to escape a gendered self. These be the simultaneous, the contradictory, the impossible goals and goads. She said, it doesn't matter, women. I could go for that. She said, I write what I want and it comes up the mother. Better than trying to. It's there and rises, rose gigantic attar. Whatever. That is the mother. Poems, puns in Hamlet about matter. She said it didn't matter, gender. Of course, she is a woman. It hadn't really struck her. It didn't matter the way some people claimed too loud. It mattered. The revolution frozen in conventional writing. So quick the insight went into natter. She said, so refused predictable, ritualistic rules of theme and tone, too flat, of affirmation, closure, transcendence, and release. The must say this or must say that, obligation, she said, and ennuis. Hung out to dry. I thought I was subtle in this argument. I'm touched, really, by imagining, astonished, that being a woman in literary life doesn't matter. No irony, the way it seems to, like historical marginality. Of course, at other times, she will insist it does matter. Forget gender neutrality. There I know just what she means. Who wants to have the thing of woman matter in any stagey, rigid ways that close down investigation and capacity for invention that might just, of course, have gotten compromised because of gender? But could it possibly matter always the same ways? So does it or does it not in this case? Neither one of us wants this theory flatter. Oh, this is about high school. Children sold to Coke and trademark Pepsi. It's so different. It's so sexy. Go by any high school prom time, all that aerosol in the ditch. What do you think that's about, bitch? 21. Tall, well-dressed woman chatting with friends, swings out of the bookstore, headed for a latte, trips a voice, we're from, loud, watch out, speaks the invisible, pale, sick, puffed face, half sunk, wool, hat hunched down, crooked old bag, lady. And the next one is 22, but it really happened. I mean, they all really happened. But and the question here, the secret question of the exam later is, what would you do? Restrained, elegant and solid, handsome and laughing, the man who in that colloquium said women writers should write worshiping maleness, males as holy and numinous, and they should do this for about 200 years, whereupon men and women writers will be more equal. He addresses me pointedly, and things can then proceed as if normal. He said it would take 200 years, meaning from now, it's 1992, for women to be real poets. An observation, even playful and ironic, that protects people of his generation and later already satisfactorily and recognizably poets from direct confrontation with existing histories of work, with the display of choices, with working conditions, the mighty and even moderate works and days of a considerable human population. But talk of problems, I become astonished. Where was my 200 years? I was alive now to find this woman irrevocably, symptomatically enraged, senza misura, and about to undergo erasure just by virtue of living when I was born. Was the task worship? Was the task writing? Don't ask. It didn't matter. I had failed at the task. This was a simple fact derived from how it happened to occur in time, not maturing 170 years from now. Hence what H said made me paralytically contumacious with some newfangled return of the icy hot. I shake with stubbornness. I freeze and I burn. I think it was maybe 23 too, or oh yes, and this one's somebody here would recognize this very closely. Excisions of letters by unknown hands, scraps tossed, typed material cut and pasted, the other side of the page blurred, lost, cut out names, alter some pronouns, loss of, blame for, shame on, underscore, undo dating, misalign linkages, take colleagueship and make it influence, make equality into a hierarchy, take collateral damage and lighten it, forget whole eras of her poetry, the nonconformist time, stabilize and tame poetic texts, and finally, for the rest, take the dead woman's life's work in journals and all her papers and burn them at her own request. So those are some sections, maybe one more, from Being Astonished. I think that was fun. And now let's see, I'm going to take, oh yeah, I wrote hard copy. Hard copy is another mode of my poetry, which is literally dealing with highly significant and baffling, in a way, statements by some critics like Adorno or Benjamin, or those at that level, at that level. And this is the famous statement of Adorno that writing poetry after Auschwitz is barbaric, is what he said. I could do it in the German if you want. And I have one section from that to read to you. Making such rules about how, who, what, why, and whether to make art is useless, quixotic. Why then did he do it? Why poetry that it has been singled out, chosen, named, like Jews first and foremost, faceted jewel, Roma, gays, leftists, dissenters, activists, nationalists, resistance, handicapped children, and more, hanging pendants. It is an act of mourning to cut off what is important to him, poetry, as if to sacrifice Isaac, to walk the choked road, to bind one's closest bond, who that once realized will blubber, snotty and noisy, screaming with fear. The knife goes up to strike the poem, held down by the driven father in transfixed obedience to higher command, whilst the angel, who looks just like doomed, sung poetry but isn't blubbering, in fact, is lucid, pretty, and removed without an ounce of human empathy, tells the dazed, shattered Abraham to desist. Adorno, desist! Put down your knife. Have I been taken in the role of angel? Perhaps I should not write poetry. And it's a long poem that tries to understand what Adorno was doing. Basically, from many facets, twisting the statement again and again. And in another mode, I wrote a book in which I dedicate poems to a variety of different people. And this poem is dedicated to my students, but it might as well be dedicated to your students. That is, to the people in this room, which I thank you very much for coming. It's called Bildungsgedicht with Apple. And Bildungsgedicht would be just the German for, like, Bildungsroman, a novel of development. But this is a poem of development. And it's more like an ode than the things I've been reading so far. And basically, if you've ever had trouble doing anything that you wanted to do, this is the poem for you, because it tracks being unable to do what you really want to do, and does it a couple of times, meaning it's realistic, when you can't really do what you want to do. The mind is clamped with questions. Poetry is apparitional. Rumbled kinwind wakes affright. Who claims instruction? Who wants the history of learning? Who needs to attend? Who waits, turns? Who tries to float stones? Gifts can be swallowed up by gifts. The words are stranger than you know. Currently, the beginning is plethora, tangled intentions, names. No level of allusion could ever be wrought or brought where it would have to be to register the full range splay. Various roads I am trying to race down simultaneously. Gone whitewater rafting on a Thanksgiving platter. Many currents of air and branch, uneven, sure and sheer, crisp slide and spray, split and split again. These streaming interior paths knocked and bumped upon solidity. Oh, poem, sweet, sweet poem, be mine. Be yearning nodules rich or touching or hard or lucid or economic, analytic, chrysophantic with hairy stars refracting under the surface of water, staged in the area of dailiness, staged in the crevice of dailiness, staged in the crime of dailiness, a word, a changeling word and no advice, another stranger word than this or that, may never get whate'er you want, for want is not the point, your want, your lack, your love, your being chosen, being not. The you is without doubt one foolish situation, pleasantly specific, even party, a sight where smallest details move are true and plain. And this absorbs, assumes a lot of that. But it is not you. The thing you try contrastingly is inside doubt. This poem is not you, except as if you are yourself in doubt. The poem is doubt itself made evident. Your trembling begins. You guzzle at the twinkling beaks of stars. Marginality, nothing I say can give the feel of it. No words, no verbs, no sentences, overcast and cloud-piled day, cold, customary night, rough writer, blue rider, rough water, art for what's sake? Porousness is a kind of pain. If I open, will I be nothing? That long a history of starting. Coarse clay pot with crude clay strip around its waist. 6 years, 10 years, 20, stark. What is it to work? Neither addressing the task nor understanding why not. Any passing cloud couldn't get more frustrated. The beads I collected were flaked off token bits of other, better beads. What does it mean to speak like that? Like, why the delay? Start to practice even hobbled up. To practice, that is, to choose. Distinguished from mannerism by suspicious curiosity, by the rejection of mechanism. Where do the words go? Where do they come from? Their laden, socio-twisty selves. What can they be held to say as syntax turns its bitter, loving hands? What I made, I want to see. Bits and mites, codes and clots, darts of lacerated clarity, words spun off by cogs of enigma, little powerful motes, black holes of history. Can scrape and rustle, say the suspect ensemble, can tingle and whistle below audibility, can offer evidentially ghost resonances and tangled ribbon of fast figuration. So, turquoise treasures, tell me if you know what is the practice of having practices. All Orphic? Is it true it's all Orphic? Or an edge, jumping within a general jumpiness? Who knows? Who knew? The words fell out like radiated hair, unstable loss. What do you mean? The silvery voice of rhetoric, emptiness. Empty emptiness, not even filled with sweetness, abrasive. The passage in passage, but the little push down and into page. I don't want much more. I don't want to talk. Bits of seeds of grass, of grassy wheat, worked dirt bits of shadowy words dug in. Plus, there was, couldn't make this one up, an apple. A giant apple blocking the view, and therefore the whole range of scales was off. Was it high or low? Could I reach it? Was it far, unsteady, unnarratable, rotted out? I mean, truly, there was a treetop apple juice label pasted down on the blank page, and on each one were words I once had typed. Apprentice yourself to yourself, said Apple One, and dry up your minimalism, said Apple Two. The appeals or appels of the apples. It was certainly advisable. I knew that was going to happen. I'm sorry to the PA person. Let's see whether we can. That was dramatic. If I can find with a poem. I'm never going to find the poem again. Oh. Where was this poem? Okay. Let's try that one again. It was certainly advice, and after all that time. So without knowing whether things would hold, I entered the errand that seemed to come from in and out, from back and forth, all sides at once. No matter how the fold became intent to speak its mobile waft of little X's marking spot of sidewalk, road, and field, to say, and this was all it was, it is, escaped, CG, choe, the rolling floor, the bumpy way, the lunge, the obdurate and brilliant hinge, determined it was to speak in languages metamorphosing, because in single language, the poem could not be complete. But since it craves a multilingualism that it barely earned, let it fantasize. For then it flew unwrapped and rose enraptured. Then it came to flow amongst its several wilder tongues, floating boats of uncut cloth that did not care for top or back, but draped and flew and blew like clouds and grew and plunged like waves. And that's the odic part at the end. And by the way, it's like the footnote is always working. I understand that those 4 phrases of foreign languages actually say different things. I really do understand that CG, which means here lies and it's used, is different from choe, which means over there is, or something like that. So I just want you to know that you've heard it accurately. I wrote a poem based on Of Being Numerous by George Oppen. And I do that every once in a while. I sort of torque something that means twist to see whether it still gives, and it's a very interesting exercise. It doesn't mean that I couldn't make my own original poems and not George Oppen's, but it was a very important thing for me to do, especially because I've been so influenced by Oppen at a certain point. So this is the short section is based on the biblical story of Rachel, which I would have a very reason to go on to investigate for a lot of reasons. And the word teraphim is glossed in the poem, so you don't have to bother with what that means. So, she stole her father's teraphim. What in the name of monotheism was that about? Those rare black stones, sacred knickknacks, idols, symbolic lion grabbed at that got chipped. Cover them with the ass of female claim. Settle in for the duration and refuse, being in the way of women, to rise. Say you are neither disloyal nor pilferer, and sit tight on the icons and rocks of meaning gathered from the paternal household. The talismanic counterfoils, even the fewest and smallest, from the fierce storehouses of articulation and defensiveness. You will remake these goods in your own blood. I didn't take enough, so go get more. Tokens from the broken labyrinth. Seems like a very short reading. But now I'm going to read a very long poem, so we'll make it all up to you. I'm going to read a poem that I've read in front of at least one person who is here. And I apologize to him. This is draft 107 meant to say, and if I could say some poems are pseudo poems and some poems are odes, I would just say this is a poem, but I can't really characterize except for the fact that it's a poem which repeats a lot of the opening, the repentend in the beginning, and after. Looks like this. Meant only to list one and one and one wonder, but found I needed verbs, and then I needed time. Meant to note the heavy doors whose weight, without having been there, one can only pretend to intuit. Meant to erase half the words or more, but couldn't bring myself to do it. That's clear. Wanted to know about making art and telling the truth. Why this engineered apple tastes dull? How did we get here? And did we decide to? Or else what flood of slough drowned us where we stood? Meant to make the stitches more overt, patches and their overlay, but aesthetically. Meant to sketch every day and thus know more, much more, so far away from what is called the center, it might as well be here. Question, looking back, what did you learn? Answer, what a small amount of metal it takes to kill you. Meant to say, cross that out. It isn't as if this thought had gotten nowhere. Junctures of intensity play out as dispersion. So meant to make a poetics. What people do, but it never included everything I wanted. Meant to take webbed strings and watch small articulations. Meant more mystery and more humility. What I meant might have been more saturated in the understanding of paralysis. Meant to write biographies of obscure objects and their provenance. What is beyond the sublime? What beyond the old poems with their alarming preponderance of white marble and green travertine? Meant to have spelled dingedict correctly, but didn't. Then I did. The lapis, the amethyst, the turquoise, the soft brown velvet sack, symbols of other gifts, all unspoken, all under-acknowledged. Never enough questions asked. Depression glass. The carrion crows, settling, satisfied on roadkill. A white chip off a deep blue bowl from France. The tinty trunk. Little toy it was, that kind of thing. You know what I mean. A list of unaccountable items, totally yours. Some are lost. Others list, awake of themselves. They send as much forward as they can. But I saw that file only in shreds. Meant to get more from it. Meant to mention the poem is always in motion. Always moving away is what I meant to say. What I meant was some painful, almost implausible point between being abandoned and what? Assumed into our humanness? This whole era has lived in denial, affirming or sanctioning genocide and destruction. meant to say, what now? Who is the intermediary for what? I meant to notice. I meant to create the kind of beauty that was not beautiful in the way I did not want. This left me without much of what I was once meant to do, so had to change my mind. Meant to keep better records. Meant to ask more questions, coming from time, webbed further in time, to get singed, torn, used up, wrangling. That's what I meant. What does the characteristic feeling of debris and twisting actually say? I meant to start, and to startle myself. It was so. Trample the vanity of the poem. Do you need this piece of string? I saved it for you, for the knot and length to work on. Under, over, twist, and let it hold, so you could weave it in the webbing that you keep too. It was your archive as well as mine, this little piece of nothing, this part of the imaginary whole. Would it have helped to be less careful or more? I would have liked to understand the choice better. Meant to. Should there be further moments of the heightening of art? I meant a greater ambivalence, meant to keep on saying, what do you do this for? And meant to stay in the ungainly spot where too little and too much struggle between an open fright. Meant to finish. Now it is not clear what I meant or what I mean by that, but readiness is right. I meant to let the poem pass into its particular autism, a compounded paralysis of overloaded desires. Can one overcome one's own cowardice? Meant to ask this. Plastic no longer means malleable. It means a voluminous tax on the ocean. Trample the vanity of the poem is a smudge on the page. If nothing more. There it is again.
What are the magical factors?
If nothing more could walk between the lines, the words I made other words, their interlocutors. Here is the twisted key. What kind of an event is this? Shouldn't all writing be utopian, but also plausible? The failures are ethical, they're rhetorical, they're political. What aren't they? But how could I limit the call I'd made? Ring the bell. Ring the bell again. This thing is the only poem you'll ever need, but you'll need it no matter who writes it over and over. I would be happy to entertain any comment or question that you want to make, or maybe, whatever. I'm kind of intrigued by what you've read or what you're baffled by, because I'm probably baffled by the same things. seriously, I'll give you a second or two. So you got the section that I was talking about with you, right?
Yeah, I am curious about just as the distinctions that you laid out. You could say, the ode and then the serial poem. Some seem notational and kind of, perceiving the passing moment and kind of being, honest. There's a kind of like directness and like candidness about catching the moment, and then the moments of, so that's one kind of thing. The poem, which I think is kind of what you call the serial poem, or seem connected to that. But and then there's the ode poems, which really rise to this quite moving eloquence. And I'm curious about how you do them both, or how you see, as a writer, does just one day this feels like an ode today, or I'm just feeling kind of gnarly and observational, and I'll kick up the ode down the street till tomorrow?
Right. I'm laughing because Joe will always catch it and get, oh my God, do you really, first of all, it's not a poem a day. I mean, you know that. I did have the dates to read, and some of the ones that are most political actually are strangely dated 1999, things like that. Okay, so that should cover, I was reading poems that are mostly before 2012, but in the 90s and just early 2000s. I can't, somehow the serial poem was very, very idiomatic to me, and I'm not sure exactly why. It was one of the first things that I started to do before I even had the word serial, which became an important element in contemporary poetry from a number of sources, among them Jack Spicer, George Oppen, Mina Loy, quite a number of people were doing versions of serial poems. And I kind of fell into it because it was a way of making argument and inferentially by moments like this. You didn't have to carry the whole thing through. And the ode is like, it was like the opposite. Literally, it just keeps on going and going. And it may have little pulses. I cannot really explain why I can do both of them. I think it has to do with two influences, if you want to say it that way, would be the easy answer. One would be a kind of Coleridge, Wordsworth amalgam, because Wordsworth has written some extraordinary odes, and which you can really admit you absolutely adore. And then some of my influences within modernism and contemporary have written serial poems, and I know that Nate and I have had a little discussion in essays about the serial, because they're just different ways of practicing. I don't know. One is more key to argument, and the other is key to sort of pulsing to transcendence. And what I kind of like about Bildungsgedicht with Apple is that it keeps on falling backwards. It doesn't get to transcendence very easily or fast or quite by a transcendent route. It's more like, can I really, why don't I just try harder, or whatever, whatever that kind of voice is. And that's how I can explain it. And I also have to say that a poem is not written in a day, for me, in a year maybe, something like that. Does anybody else have a comment? You're welcome actually to kind of grab them up and see how far it can go.
Let me see. See what. Is it on?
Is it,
There we go. Okay.
many people have to do it.
I mean, I don't know how much slack. Oh, I got some slack here, so I can come after you.
Is there anybody who wants this
I
mic?
really need it.
I don't know if we do. Yeah.
Take it away.
So, okay, Samantha?
Yeah.
I can see you, Joe.
Okay.
I'll come right here. Thank you, Joe.
It's my frustrated ambition to talk show.
That's okay. I give you the ratings. Hi, thank you. So the poem, part of the poem that you read on astonishment, one of them ended with a sort of image of the burning of journals by a woman, or like posthumously burning her work, right? That sort of image. I was just wondering if you had a particular woman writer in mind when you wrote that poem, or if it was just a whole bunch of them. I would like to know, I guess, if you had any particular inspiration.
Well,
Yeah.
I mean, by some people, sorry, here we go. I think I get the gist of the question, but I'm not 100%, so maybe, I might ask for clarification. It is like a poem à clé, like a roman à clé, meaning there are some specific people I actually am referencing in my own experience with these people, but I'm supposedly responding to an anthology which is an anthology about a number of women writers contemporary who are considered or were considered whatever innovative or experimental means, and it was done by two feminist writers, editors, Cynthia Hogue and Laura Hinton, and it was their intention to gather essays on people like Alice Notley, and not all of whom, by the way, would agree with feminist production or would call themselves feminists. In fact, quite a number did not. But the principle that I've always worked on critically, after I could figure out what I was doing, was sort of like feminist production is one thing. When you produce a poem deliberately with an idea that you want to support a certain position that women have taken. By the way, feminism is many, many things, so some of it is not really things that you want. Like certain kinds of 19th century feminism has real severe problems. But what I've always wanted to do critically is have a feminism of reception, not of production. That is, I don't care whether the writer I'm talking about had the same opinions that I might have as a woman writer. I just don't care. I'm willing to give them the right to speak as they want in their time, whatever. But I want to apply a sense of what feminist reception would be if I asked gender questions of this writer. And you can always ask gender questions of writing. So that particular poem was written very purposefully because I was supposedly responding to an anthology. The backstory is sort of it's a sad little moment which I can giggle at, which was that somebody was supposed to write an article about my work, and of course I was very interested, assiduously engaged in and the person couldn't come through for some reason, whatever the personal reasons were. And so they had a hole in the anthology where they wanted to have something about me, and they didn't. And so they asked me to write actually a critical article. And I thought, I don't want to write no more critical articles. I'm not doing a critical article about someone else's work in this anthology. God damn it. So I wrote a poem that tried to, it's not summarizing the essays in that anthology. It was not my job really to do that. I just thought, I wrote a poem about kind of what the world of being an experimental, quote unquote, woman writer would be, who has the name of feminism, whatever. And it was really fun because I could say things that in the guise of writing a poem. And some of them, there were definitely people behind some of the sections, but there were definitely kind of amalgams behind some of the sections. And I wouldn't now want to identify, except if somebody were smart enough to figure out, like for example, the one which ends, burned all the, her manuscripts at her own request, really has an amalgam of Niedecker and also, you could say, Dickinson at some point in it. So it kind of mushes things together. What else can I say about that? The poem, I liked that poem. I liked doing the poem. And I liked talking about the things I was talking about. So, was that sort of good
Yes.
enough answer?
Yes.
I don't want to start naming names. I will say one thing. I read the poem, it's in that poem, about H, who said 200 years later. And somebody at a poetry reading, a friend of mine, taking advantage of the volubility and the willingness to sort of exude whatever I'm exuding, said to me, "Who's H?" I said, "It stands for he." I thought, goddamn, I'm not telling. So, anybody else want the mic?
Any further questions or comments?
Yeah,
Karen?
you have to come forth, unfortunately. I'm sorry that this kind of show, stand and deliver.
Stand.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. I just wanted to ask about how you approach reading to a crowd like this. How do you curate, and what were you so like? I felt like you were very excited to read many of these poems, and then you were like even prepared with props in a way. So I loved that. As someone who would also love to read poems one day, I'm curious about that process.
Yeah. Right. I actually really do love to read lots of poems, not just my own. That's number one. And it's a pleasure to do it. I've seen a lot of very bad readings in my time, including, there was a T.S. Eliot Manor, which was as if you didn't care that you wrote this, particularly when you're willing to. And Robert Lowell, who used to go up at every end of line, and then he sort of began to go up again. It was completely provoking. You thought, can this guy read these poems, which are not bad poems at all, like he means it? So you get the sing-song aspect of poems really wipes me out. I think it's just so bad. And you have to work at reading the poem like it was written. You want to say things in slightly heteroglossic ways, that meaning you have an urge to use a lot of different dictions and tonalities and almost like idioms. Like you can go from, what do you mean, to something very much deeper. And that's the kind of poem I like to write, so I like to read it. About curating the reading, I'm sorry that I slipped up a couple of times. I get a little funny. The light was not perfect, unfortunately, so I was having trouble seeing some of my words. And the joke about readings is that sometimes a person will substitute a word and you think, my goodness, that person was rewriting the poem as they were reading it. A very strange phenomenon, by the way. And you know what you read, what you wrote, but you can't necessarily read the word. So, how do I curate it? I wanted to give examples precisely of ode and seriality, and I wanted to give a sense of torque with at least one or two of the sections that I read. And I sort of wanted to read the poem to students because you have been all students, or we have all been students, and so it was like it's sometimes much harder than you think to do the work you want to do in the time that you think you have to do it. So it's a poem that I like to be able to read. It's also, by the way, I actually made that thing with the collage, with those things typed on a thing when I was really able to begin. And I had this, like, how do I type dry up your minimalism? on an apple juice label. Okay, I guess I mean, if I'm not going to take advice from anybody else, at least I can take it when I give myself some advice. So that's almost a self-joke when you write something and then later you look at it and you think, my God, did I really say that to myself? How interesting. What a smart thing to do. Gee whiz. So anyway, that's the story about that. And I sometimes will joke in reading, like, Lock the Doors, I have 113 more poems to write. But I'm not going to do that joke right now. Because I don't